Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we are taking a look at Werewolves, a movie that I did not think I was going to be reviewing whatsoever. I didn't even know this existed until like 2 weeks ago when I spotted the trailer on YouTube. And I'm not going to lie, when I see a trailer for a movie like this, I always get my hopes up because it's not very often that we see a low budget, largely practical creature feature get the silver screen treatment like this. Weirdly enough, even when this type of film isn't very good, I'm still drawn to them. You know, the many creature features of the 80s that you see on Shudder or Max or whatever streaming service they may be available on nowadays. I check those things out all the time when I'm in the mood for them. I don't have high expectations for them, but I still find some enjoyment in the gruesome practical effects, the old school techniques that you just don't see filmmakers use much nowadays because there's not a need for them now that we have CGI that can do so many things at a higher cost but in a much shorter amount of time. And while I certainly didn't expect Werewolves to be a great film, I always have this inner feeling that there's a potential for filmmakers to do a lot with a small budget. It's just a matter of whether or not the director and screenwriters have it in them to really take these limited resources and do something spectacular with them. And when it comes to this movie overall, it certainly could have been way worse. This is significantly better than I was expecting it to be, even though I was kind of secretly excited for it. It's probably not very high praise to start with, but we'll talk more about what worked and what didn't work in a second. Stephen C. Miller, the director of this film, he's made a lot of low-budget movies before, but never one that's gotten a theatrical release to the best of my knowledge. And it's clear from watching the movie that this was a genuine passion project from him. For better or worse, you know, even if the film isn't perfect, I can tell that he's putting as much effort as he can into genuinely making something sincere. In terms of giving us an old-fashioned creature feature and bringing innovation to the genre, this movie does a lot of things right, and it does a lot of things wrong. So the film opens with text over a black screen that basically explains the premise to us. I'm not a big fan of when movies do this, and it didn't kick it off to a great start, but it at least gets the information across quickly. Basically, 1 year prior to the events of this film, a supermoon triggered a gene that exists in all humans, and anyone that was exposed to the moonlight on this night turned into a werewolf for the rest of the night, and it turned into a disaster. Somewhere around 1 billion humans died. Now we're about a year later, and there's another supermoon approaching. So we have a group of scientists that are trying to find a solution to this problem so that humans that are exposed to the moonlight don't transform into these ravenous monsters and wreak havoc. Frank Grillo, or Grillo, I've heard people say it both ways lately, and I'm honestly not sure which one it is. He plays one of these scientists. I'm not sure I really buy him as a microbiologist or whatever he's supposed to be. But his main drive, his motivation for doing this is that he has a widowed sister-in-law and her daughter whom he's trying to protect. And regardless of whether or not they're able to find a solution in this crunch time period before the supermoon hits, we know havoc is going to break loose, and there's going to be werewolves, lots of people with big guns firing at them, and thus we have this chaotic action horror film that definitely feels like a mixture between The Purge and Dog Soldiers. If you haven't seen Dog Soldiers, that's kind of a hidden gem, low-budget werewolf movie that this undoubtedly takes inspiration from. It's not my favorite. I still prefer something like The Howling, Ginger Snaps, which is my personal favorite, or An American Werewolf in London, but nevertheless, it's underrated. Jumping right into my positives, they used mostly practical effects for the werewolves. You know, dudes in full-body suits. And I'm pretty sure Alec Gillis worked on the creatures in this film. He's obviously a legendary figure in this field. He worked on the xenomorphs in Aliens, among many other achievements. But the creatures in this movie, they look fantastic. Great movement, especially with the mouths too. It's easy for those to come off as robotic, but they're very smooth. The lip movements look organic. It makes these creatures feel so real. Despite the fact that practical effects do often have their imperfections, I think the fact that there's something tangibly there will always trump CGI. I do like the ingenuity with the werewolves in this movie too, in that they retain some of the qualities that they had as a human in terms of their appearance. It really gives each individual monster its own personality, which you don't see a lot in this genre. Over the course of the film, we basically follow Frank Grillo and Katrina Law, who play the main two scientists that are trying to find a cure to this, and they're in development of this thing called moonscreen, which is like a topical thing that you apply to yourself like sunscreen, but it somehow protects you from whatever triggers the mutant gene that transforms you into a werewolf. It's very silly and over the top, but the movie doesn't take itself too seriously for the most part, which I appreciate. Occasionally, wonky dialogue aside, I enjoyed following these two characters. They were both badass. They had a nice dynamic between the two of them. I have to commend Frank Grillo because he's taking this very seriously as well, and not in a sense that he's taking the character too seriously in a film that is obviously meant to be very schlocky and goofy and over the top. But I always really appreciate seeing actors that could be taking on bigger roles take these smaller indie projects and actually they seem like they are trying to do what the director wants them to do and helping them bring their vision to fruition. Now, the movie does this thing where it flip-flops between the two main plot lines that are going on, the first one being Frank Grillo trying to get back to his sister-in-law, and then we cut to the sister-in-law who is boarding up her home with her daughter and walking around the house with a shotgun. There are so many shots of her just walking around with that damn gun and nothing is happening, so every time they cut back to her, I lost interest. I guess this is where I segue into my issues with the film. As much as I wanted to love this, it just has some things holding it back that I can't ignore, and some of these are probably budgetary restraints, and it does feel slightly unfair to hold those against the movie, but they do exist as problems nonetheless, and they're going to be noticeable to everybody who watches. For the most part, it is visually murky. There's a fight scene in the rain that brought Aliens vs. Predator Requiem to mind, which is not a good thing. The lighting was way too dark, and it's just like you're watching two silhouettes moving around in the darkness, and it is completely indiscernible which one is which and what exactly is happening. I also found that the movie often opted to cut away right when something really cool was about to happen. For instance, a werewolf will pounce on someone, and then instantly it cuts away to something else, so you don't really get to see the kill. Although I will say there is one death scene in which someone gets their face bitten off, and it was gruesome. Really appreciate that. I wish there was more of it. Another big criticism that I have, and I've seen a lot of people complaining about this on Letterboxd and other reviewing platforms, this director really likes to use lens flares. I mean, like constantly. And there's nothing more annoying than trying to look at a character or a really cool monster and having these bright blobs of light pop up on the screen and obscure your view of them. It was very distracting. It was as if they had strobe lights on set through the entire shoot. I wish the characters were smarter too, and this is such an easy fix in a film. You can have antagonists be scary and intimidating without dumbing down your characters to put them in situations where they're in danger. And perhaps the most frustrating thing about this movie is just the wasted potential. There's something that happens in the third act that I won't talk in detail about because it's a spoiler, but it kind of breaks the rules that the movie set up for itself in terms of how the werewolves behave. We know that they retain some physical attributes when they transform, but we don't know how much of their personalities they retain. I think that's something that the film could have indulged in a bit more, and it would have benefited particularly this plot point in the third act that doesn't really make sense in the context of everything else that's happening.
Hey! Bite me!
I find myself in a tough spot here because I really respect the director for pouring his passion into making something that is so unabashedly simple and feral with all of these old school techniques that are so rarely used nowadays. And the fact that it made it to theaters is commendable. It's like, I want people to support this, but I also can't quite recommend the film to general audiences because it is very schlocky, and I think most people will walk away thinking it's very forgettable. So ultimately, Werewolves is the type of film that you'd probably see playing on the Sci-Fi Channel, but it is certainly a cut above a lot of its competition, so I'm left feeling largely indifferent towards it. I think it would be a fine watch on like Shudder or another streaming service on a rainy night. I don't think it's really worthy of a theatrical watch, but again, if you're really into this stuff, definitely go out and support it because I want to see more stuff like this just with some improvements. I'm going to give Werewolves a very high 2.5 stars. It comes close to that 3, it really does. You know what, in a few months when this comes out on streaming, I'll probably watch it again and either the issues will be even more glaringly obvious and I'll realize I made the right decision, or I'll be like, what the hell was I talking about? This is fun and I should have given it a higher grade. Either way, this is how I'm feeling about it right now. So if you guys do see Werewolves, be sure to let me know down in the comments what you think of it. And absolutely hit that like button and subscribe while you're at it if you want to see more content like this. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.